Renfield. Occupying the strategically opposite position to Van Helsing in the novel is Renfield, an inpatient in a lunatic asylum. He stands outside the little band opposed to Dracula, being psychically in tune with the Count and initially anxious to serve him. In that sense he, too, like Harker and Van Helsing, can be viewed as a manifestation of Stoker. Renfield being the minion of a vampire, Stoker of an actor. Renfield is 59, of ruddy complexion and with pleading eyes. He possesses great physical strength, is selfish, secretive, and purposeful. He is morbidly excitable, being prone to violent spasms. He is also, it later transpires, surprisingly well educated and articulate. As regards the novel's structure, one of Renfield's functions is to form a triangular relationship. He connects with Dracula on the one hand, his pursuers on the other, which helps to clarify the reader's understanding of both. A second function arises when Stoker attempts to use Renfield to expound a pseudo-scientific theory of vampirism. The patient gives the lie to those who would assume vampirism to be exclusively the product of simple-minded peasants in distant lands. Renfield is himself a living vampire, serving his vampire apprenticeship while confined within the walls of an asylum. He consumes blood by consuming life. Consider the children's song. There was an old lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed a fly. Perhaps she'll die. There was an old lady who swallowed a spider, bird, cat, dog, goat, cow, horse. Renfield is like that old lady, and throughout Stoker's notes he is referred to as the flyman or the fly patient. Incarcerated in his cell, he takes to catching flies and eating them, seeking justification and explanation in the scriptural phrase, "The blood is the life." Not content with flies, he turns his attention to spiders, which have previously caught the digested flies, all to provide him, or so he thinks, with good, strong, wholesome life. Next he contrives to gorge sparrows. Jubilant in the various accumulated lives he is ingesting, he asks for a cat, but does not get one, and even tries to kill a human solely for the purpose of lapping his blood. He believes that flesh and blood from living creatures will grant him immortality, and for his pains he is medically classified as zoophagous, life-eating maniac. Another role for Renfield is that of barometer of the Count's presence, as will be explored. Renfield takes on a John the Baptist identity, prefiguring the arrival of his Christ. In this connection, one Dracula etymologist has suggested that Ren means to clear a way for a pastoral area, a field. Certainly, Renfield's eccentric behaviour starts attracting attention while the Count is still hundreds of miles from England, although it is not clear whether it is he who senses Dracula or vice versa. His tantrums thereafter coincide with the times, dawn, noon, and dusk, when Dracula's powers are changing or at their weakest. Finally, Renfield is included in the cast to highlight the issue of madness. Is it really he who is mad for acknowledging the existence of Dracula, when other saner persons must sooner or later come to the same conclusion? Like Harker, Renfield desperately wants to be able to distinguish between nightmare and grim reality. As with Harker, too, truth eventually wins through, confirming what Van Helsing once observed. I may gain more knowledge out of the folly of this madman than I shall from the teaching of the most wise. Strange to say, although Renfield is the most unusual and bizarre character in the novel, apart from Dracula, he is also, paradoxically, the most convincing. The same could not be said of the three young worldly heroes. Seward, Homewood, and Morris. Dr. Seward. Dr. John Jack Seward shares with Jonathan Harker the facility of being a compulsive diarist. Many of the events of the book are seen through his eyes, or rather mouth. For Seward records his thoughts onto the newly invented phonograph. Seward functions as a linkman, being the catalyst which brings four of the other male characters together. His relationship with Van Helsing and Renfield, for example, is central to the unfolding of the plot. Seward is a 29-year-old psychiatrist running a large private lunatic asylum, a booming industry in late Victorian England. He is of good birth, handsome, with a strong jaw and good forehead, and eminently marriageable. He has had his share of youthful adventures, hunting and travelling the world, though nonetheless appears inexperienced and nervous in the company of desirable women. Seward has studied under Van Helsing in Amsterdam. He was his favourite pupil, and the admiration evidently goes both ways. But the personal bond goes deeper than merely shared professional competence. Seward once saved his master's life in circumstances which cast a shadow over an already deepening plot. Van Helsing suffered a wound inflicted by a gangrenous knife, which Seward had to suck clean. Seward, in other words, has sucked Van Helsing's blood, a second instance of natural blood-sucking added to Renfield's, introduced by Stoker. Seward is included as a representative of all that Van Helsing rejects: materialist, rationalist science, cure-all of the late Victorian age. Seward finds it difficult to have faith or trust in anything. He does not trust people he does not know well, and in the case of Van Helsing, not even someone he does. His role is also that of a social commentator. Through him, for example, the reader is made aware of how Victorian manhood refuses to acknowledge emotion. Tearful breakdowns are considered unmanly, but if unavoidable, are best performed in the company of women and not men. Van Helsing, despite Seward's prejudices, presumably admires his ex-student's intellect, just as Sherlock Holmes respects Dr. Watson's. The reader, however, is less impressed with Seward, though the Doctor does occupy the same position vis-a-vis Van Helsing as Watson does for Holmes. Seward's comparability to Dr. Watson extends to possession of the same Christian name and membership of the same profession. Both characters are given to some half-baked philosophizing. In Dracula, Seward is the foil, the means by which Stoker can explain everything to the reader through someone who cannot or will not fully comprehend unless everything is elaborately reduced to first principles. Seward is the last of the characters to understand and accept the presence of the supernatural in their midst. Punch, in reviewing Dracula, summarized Seward as saying, "The inquiring, skeptical, credulous noodle, the devoted, admiring slave of the philosophic, astute hero, ever ready to question, ever ready to dispute, ever ready to make a mistake at a critical moment, or to go to sleep just when success depends upon his remaining awake." Seward, in fact, is more than just a noodle. For one thing, his medical ethics are somewhat questionable. He admits to a certain cruelty in his handling of Renfield, who is his pet lunatic. Although familiar with Renfield's violent mania, Seward still encourages him to escape so that his behaviour while at large can be studied. Nor is Seward averse to offering Renfield a live cat that he earlier wanted to eat, though his patient this time declines it. Seward even demonstrates a happy disregard for the law when it is expedient to do so. For example, sidestepping the need for an inquest into Lucy's death. although he has at that time no inkling of what caused it. Moreover, just as Van Helsing is partly responsible for Lucy's death, so Seward ultimately fails as Renfield's physician, both in the diagnostic sense and by the contributory negligence which results in his patient's death. When Renfield, with the unexpected lucidity of apparent sanity, tries to show others what he alone can see, he is disregarded, fatally for him. He is mortally wounded, but is abandoned by Seward, who does not even summon an assistant to care for him, and is left to die alone. If Seward is a somewhat unprincipled doctor, he is even more pitiful in his private life. Early in the book, he is driven to distraction by his love for Lucy. His proposal of marriage is turned down, and within weeks he confesses to a savage delight at the prospect of beheading her. Worse, as the hunt for Dracula nears its climax, this respectable man of healing comes to feel wild with excitement as battle approaches. He naively imagines he now knows what men feel like in battle when the call to action is heard. Obviously unbeknown to Seward, that feeling is usually described as one of abject terror. To compound matters, Seward not only fails to appreciate his limitations, medical and otherwise, but instead harbours a somewhat disconcerting personal ambition. The fact that he runs his own lunatic asylum at such a young age presumably testifies to his conventional medical abilities and his entrepreneurial aptitude. Yet he yearns to promote his own claims to medical research, and sees Renfield as the key to his success. He even envies his patient's sense of purpose. Seward's ego is sufficiently developed for him to contemplate whether he might enjoy a congenitally exceptional brain, but eventually, depressed and unsettled by unrequited love, obsessed by Renfield's behaviour, and mentally tortured by the apparently supernatural intrusion into his tidy scientific mind, he is forced to tackle the nature of sanity, his own and Van Helsing's, head-on. His innate 19th century belief in progress clashes with his increasing doubts about himself and his motives. Not surprisingly, given his inner torment, he is usually ineffectual when it matters. Arthur Holmwood, Lord Godalming. The most shadowy and underdeveloped of the major characters is the Honourable Arthur Holmwood, Lord Godalming, as he becomes. It is obligatory for Stoker's young heroes to be physically attractive, and Holmwood conforms, being tall, handsome, and curly-haired, and possessing stalwart proportions. Naturally buoyant, he is wrecked by the double death of his fiancée. Although he is good with dogs and steam launches, he seems otherwise to have no worthwhile qualities at all, save those of inherited wealth, for which he is not responsible. True to his privileged upbringing, he is preoccupied with his honour as a gentleman and his faith as a Christian, though neither prevents him using his title or his money to win whatever favours he wants. His lordship's practical suggestions are usually cause for some hilarity. To assist in the undercover operation to unearth Dracula's whereabouts in the run-down East End of London, he offers to provide his heraldic adorned coaches, and when the action shifts to the primitive vastness of Eastern Europe, he inquires about the feasibility of hiring a special train to transport his comrades around the Black Sea hinterland.